He mocked me before everyone. Next day, I, an army captain, disappeared under sealed orders. The silence that permeates a room full of senior military officers carries a particular weight. It's dense, charged with expectations, hierarchy, and tradition. That day, that silence was broken by Colonel James Whitaker's laughter, a laugh directed solely at me. My name is Alexandra Hayes, a 28-year-old captain in the United States Army, and until that moment, I believed I had earned the respect of my superiors and subordinates through hard work, dedication, and competence. A West Point honors graduate, I specialize in military intelligence and tactical operations, with 2 tours of duty in the Middle East under my belt. I wasn't just another officer. I was one of the few women to achieve the rank of captain at such a young age in an elite unit. The meeting that Thursday afternoon was routine operations analysis, strategy adjustments, field reports. The conference room at Fort Bragg, North Carolina was packed with officers of varying rank. The air conditioning barely contained the July heat, which seeped through every available crack, making uniforms even more uncomfortable. I presented my analysis of a new technique for extracting teams from hostile territory that I had developed after months of study and simulation. Captain Hayes believes her dolls can be rescued faster with this new method, Whitaker interrupted, drawing snickers from the room. Perhaps we should remind her that this isn't a game of house, but a military operation. I felt my face burn as I held my posture. Whitaker was known for his conservatism and barely concealed disdain for women in leadership positions. To him, I was a quota, not a soldier. Sir, the data suggests a 37% reduction in exposure time and 42% reduction in aircraft vulnerability during extraction. I replied, keeping my voice steady. Data? Hayes? You have actual combat experience to validate that. Data? He practically spat the word as if it were an insult. Or are you just playing with your computer programs while real men risk their lives? The room fell into a deathly silence. Everyone knew I had 2 combat medals. Everyone, including Whitaker. My experience is recorded in my service record, Colonel, including the extraction of Delta Team from Mosul in 2022 under intense enemy fire. Ah yes, when you were carried out by your sergeant after panicking, wasn't that right? He smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Or is that part not in your precious reports? That was a blatant lie. I had personally led that extraction with a bullet lodged in my shoulder. The sergeant in question, Ryan Mitchell, had actually been saved by me when his equipment failed during the descent. But Whitaker was counting on the fact that no one in the room would dare contradict a colonel, even if they knew the truth. Lieutenant Colonel Garcia, sitting to my right, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He had been my commanding officer on that mission and knew the truth. But he also knew that Whitaker was close to General Brooks, the base commander. Perhaps Captain Hayes should return to the administrative division, where her spreadsheet skills would be more useful. Whitaker continued. Leave the actual operations to those who have what it takes. That's when I noticed General Jackson of the Special Operations Division watching intently from the back of the room. His face was emotionless, but his eyes were fixed on me, gauging my reaction. With all due respect, Colonel, I replied, I invite you to test my method in a live simulation. The results will speak for themselves. Whitaker laughed out loud this time, not bothering to hide his disdain. Hear that, gentlemen? The little girl wants to show us how it's done. He leaned across the table, his face inches from mine. You're a joke, Hayes. A political quota who is promoted beyond his capacity because the military needs to show its inclusiveness. Nothing more. I felt his saliva hit my face as he spoke. My heart was pounding so hard I feared everyone could hear, but I showed no emotion. Years of training had taught me to maintain my composure, even when all I wanted was to break that arrogant nose. General Preston, who was presiding over the meeting, finally intervened. That will be enough, Colonel Whitaker. Captain Hayes, please continue your presentation. I finished my presentation mechanically, aware of the mixed looks of pity and embarrassment directed at me. When the meeting ended, I left quickly, ignoring some colleagues' attempts to express solidarity. I didn't need pity. I needed respect. That night, in my quarters, I received a message to report to General Jackson's office at 6 o'clock the next morning. No explanation, just a direct summons. I prepared my uniform, double-checking every detail, and tried to sleep, to no avail. At 4 in the morning, I gave up and went to the base gym, where I spent the next few hours taking out my frustration on a punching bag. At 6 o'clock sharp, I knocked on General Jackson's office door. "Come in, Captain," his deep voice replied. The general sat behind his desk, examining a folder marked confidential. He didn't look up when I entered or when I saluted. "Sit down, Hayes." I obeyed, maintaining my upright posture even in the chair. "What happened yesterday was unacceptable," he said finally, still not looking at me. My stomach sank. Was he going to reprimand me? For defying a superior officer? For causing a scene? Colonel Whitaker's behavior was unbecoming of an officer in the American military, he continued, surprising me, but I'm not here to discuss that. Finally, he looked up from his folder and studied me for a long moment. "Your analysis of the new extraction method was correct. In fact, it was more than correct. It was brilliant." I kept my expression neutral, though internally I felt a wave of relief and validation. "What I'm about to tell you now doesn't leave this office," he continued, closing the folder. "Captain Hayes, I'm offering you a mission that doesn't officially exist under the direct command of the Special Operations Division. If you accept, you will disappear tomorrow. Your current detail will only be informed that you have been transferred under sealed orders. No further explanation will be provided." My heart raced. Special Operations was the holy grail for intelligence officers like Muriel. Meaningful work, far from base politics and stifling bureaucracy. "What is the mission, sir?" "I can't give you full details until you accept. What I can tell you is that it involves your expertise in extraction and infiltration, and that it's of critical importance to national." He paused. "I can also tell you that it's extremely dangerous, with a significant likelihood that you won't return." I didn't hesitate. "I accept, sir." He nodded, as if he already knew my answer. "I hoped so. You have 24 hours to get your affairs in order. You can't tell anyone where you're going or why. Tomorrow at 5 o'clock, a car will be waiting at the east gate to take you to the staging area." I stood up and saluted. "Thank you for the opportunity, sir." He returned the salute. "Don't thank me yet, Hayes. You might hate me before this is over." I spent the next day finalizing pending reports, handing over responsibilities to other officers, and packing the few personal belongings I kept in my barracks. I had no immediate family to inform. My parents had died in a car accident 3 years earlier, and I had no siblings. I'd had a few brief relationships over the years, but no serious ones. The Army was my life, my identity. At 1800, I received a notification on my military phone. It was an email from Whitaker to the entire unit, announcing that he would be conducting a thorough review of recently proposed operational methods to ensure we are following best practices based on actual combat experience. Not academic theories, it was a direct reference to my presentation, an attempt to discredit my work even after the public humiliation. I deleted the email without responding and continued packing my backpack. The next morning at 4:30, I left my quarters for the last time. The early morning air was cool, with the promise of another scorching day ahead. The base was quiet, with only the bare minimum of personnel awake. I walked unhurriedly to the east gate, my backpack holding everything I would need. An unmarked black sedan was waiting for me, engine running, windows tinted. The driver, a burly man in civilian clothes, opened the back door without a word. I climbed in, and we drove off immediately. After about an hour of silent travel, we arrived at a private airstrip where a Gulfstream jet was waiting. I was ushered directly aboard, where I found General Jackson already seated. "Ready to disappear, Captain?" "More than ready, sir," I replied, sitting down across from him. As the plane took off, I felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. I was leaving behind the humiliation and limitations I face, but I was flying into the possibly to my death. "Now I can tell you more," Jackson said, handing me a sealed folder. "Your mission is to extract a highly valuable asset from one of the most dangerous places on the planet right now." I opened the folder and found a photo of a middle-aged man with gray hair and piercing eyes. Dr. Farid Nazari, an Iranian nuclear scientist, Dr. Nazari was the principal developer of Iran's nuclear program for 15 years, Jackson explained. 3 months ago, he contacted us offering defection and detailed information about the program in exchange for asylum for himself and his family. I flipped through the file, quickly absorbing the details. Has your family been extracted yet? That's the complication, Jackson replied. His wife and 2 teenage children were intercepted during the initial extraction attempt. They are being held at a military facility outside Tehran. Nazari refuses to fully cooperate until they are rescued. I stared at the general, finally understanding the magnitude of the mission. Are we talking about an unauthorized operation on Iranian territory to extract 3 hostages from a heavily guarded military installation? Exactly. He showed no emotion. That's why we need your rapid extraction method. The window of opportunity will be extremely narrow. Why me? There are operators with more experience in the field. Jackson leaned forward. Because your method works, because you have the right combination of tactical and analytical, and frankly, because you have no connections that could compromise the mission. If something goes wrong, the American government will deny any involvement. You're beyond your own. I nodded, understanding the implication. It was a suicide job disguised as an opportunity. When do we start? We've already begun, he replied. As of this moment, Captain Alexandra Hayes is no more. For all intents and purposes, you have been transferred to an administrative unit in Alaska. Any communications attempting to locate you will be redirected appropriately. And who am I now? He handed me a passport. Sophia Blackwood, Canadian private security consultant. You have a new identity, employment history, and contact. You will spend the next 2 weeks memorizing every detail before being inducted. The plane began its descent. Through the window, I saw mountains and dense forest. Where are we? A secluded training site in Montana. Here you will prepare with a skeleton crew who only know parts of the mission. No one but me knows the full picture. When we landed and disembarked, I was greeted by a tall, thin man with gray hair who introduced himself as Smith, obviously a pseudonym. Welcome to your grave, Sophia, he said with a dry smile. In the next few days, I will kill Alexandra Hayes and resurrect you in her place. The next 2 weeks were the most intense of my life. Continuous training, simulations, memorizing maps, escape routes, and contact points. I learned basic Farsi, Iranian customs, and how to navigate Tehran without attracting attention. I had my hair darkened, my eyebrows dyed, and learned how to apply makeup that subtly altered the shape of my face. The support team consisted of just 4 people, all veterans of clandestine operations. None of them used real names or talked about their past. We were ghosts training a ghost. On the morning of the 15th day, I received General Jackson's final briefing via secure video conference. The Nazari family is being transferred tomorrow to another facility, he said. During the transport, we will have approximately a 3-minute window to intercept the convoy and extract the targets. After that, you will have to reach the extraction point in less than 10 minutes before a full military response is mobilized. And Dr. Nazari? He is safe in an undisclosed location. Once we confirm you have family, he will be transferred to permanent facilities in the U.S. I see, I replied, studying the transfer route map. Hayes, he said, his tone changing to something more personal. You know why I chose you for this, don't you? Because my method works. I repeated his earlier. Yes, but there's more. He paused. I was in Mosul in 2022. I saw what you did. I saw how you carried Mitchell for nearly a mile with a bullet in the shoulder while maintaining covering fire. I saw your determination, and I saw how Whitaker distorted everything afterward because he couldn't accept that a woman had done what men under his command couldn't. I felt a lump in my throat. It was the first time someone high up in the world had openly acknowledged the injustice I had suffered. Thank you, sir. That means a lot. Don't thank me. Prove me right. He hung up the call. That night, I couldn't sleep. I mentally reviewed every detail of the operation, every possible complication, every contingency plan. When dawn arrived, I was ready. I was flown by helicopter to a private airport where a jet took me to Ankara, Turkey. From there, I flew commercially to Dubai as Sophia Blackwood. a Canadian consultant. In Dubai, I met my local contact, a Lebanese man named Faris, who worked for a CIA front company. "Your package has arrived," he said, handing me a suitcase. Inside were suitable clothing, fake Iranian documents, a secure phone, and, hidden in a false compartment, a silenced Sig Sauer P226 pistol with 3 magazines. From Dubai, I crossed into Iran overland via the Azerbaijan border, using documentation identifying me as an Armenian businesswoman. The border was less heavily guarded there, and the guards only gave my papers a cursory glance before allowing me through. Once in Iran, I traveled by bus to Tabriz, then took a domestic flight to Tehran, arriving exactly 36 hours before the Nazari scheduled transfer. My contact in Tehran was a middle-aged woman named Parisa, who ran a small carpet shop as a cover. She put me up in a room in the back of the shop. "Everything is ready," she said in perfect, albeit heavily accented, English. "The vehicle will be on site tomorrow at 9 o'clock, as planned. The diversion team is also in place, and the escape route confirmed. The boat will be waiting in the Caspian Sea. From there, you will continue to Azerbaijan." I spent the rest of the day studying maps and memorizing alternative routes. That night, I prepared my gear and got as much rest as possible. At 7 o'clock the next morning, I left the store dressed like a conservative Iranian woman, with a hijab covering my hair and part of my face. Parisa drove me to an abandoned warehouse about 2 miles from the convoys. "Good luck," she said as she left me. "If we don't meet again, it was an honor." "Likewise," I replied, knowing she was risking her life just by being involved. At the warehouse, I found the promised vehicle, a black SUV with bulletproof glass and fake military license plates. I checked the weapons hidden under the seat, an AK-103 assault rifle, and 2 smoke grenades in the medical kit in the glove compartment. At 8:45, I positioned the vehicle 200 meters from the interception point, sharp curve where the convoy would be forced to slow down. I called the designated number on the secure phone. "Position confirmed," he simply said, before hanging up. At exactly 9:02, I heard the explosion about a kilometer away. It was the diversion team creating an incident to divert security resources from the convoy. I started the engine and advanced to my position. The convoy appeared 2 minutes later, a military vehicle in the lead, followed by an armored van carrying the Nazaris, and another military vehicle bringing up the rear. I waited until they reached the curve and then accelerated, colliding sideways with the vehicle in front, forcing it off the road. Before the van driver could react, I positioned my SUV directly in front of him, blocking his path. The vehicle behind him stopped, and 2 soldiers got out with guns. I opened fire with the AK-103, aiming for the tires and engine, not the men. I didn't want unnecessary casualties. As they ducked for cover, I threw a smoke grenade, creating a dense curtain between us. I ran to the van where the driver was trying to reverse. I shot the lock on the side door and flung it open. Inside, I found 3 people, a woman of about 45 and 2 teenage boys, a boy of about 16 and a girl of maybe 14. They were handcuffed and looked terrified. "I'm American," she said in basic Farsi. "I've come to get you. Dr. Nazari sent me." The woman, Layla Nazari, widened her eyes at the mention of her husband's name. I nodded in confirmation and quickly cut the handcuffs with a metal cutter I carried on my belt. "Hurry up," he said in English, knowing she understood. "We have less than 2 minutes. I led them to my SUV as the smoke began to clear. The gunfire had started again, with soldiers firing blindly in our direction. A bullet grazed my left arm, but I ignored the pain. I loaded the family into the back seat and got into the driver's seat. "Stay down and don't look up," I ordered, as I sped toward our escape route. In my rearview mirror, I saw 2 additional military vehicles approaching quickly. We hadn't anticipated reinforcements arriving so quickly. I took the alternate route, taking side streets and narrow alleys in the Tehran suburbs. The boy, Amir, was groaning in the back seat, clutching his leg. I realized he'd been hit during the shooting. "How long until we reach safety?" Layla asked, pressing a piece of clothing against her son's wound. 7 minutes to the next point," I replied, checking the makeshift GPS on my secure phone. "Hang in there." I maneuvered skillfully through traffic, trying not to attract attention but maintaining my speed. From the military frequency I could pick up on my car radio, I knew they'd already issued a general alert. We had less time than I thought. We arrived at the meeting point, an underground garage in a seemingly abandoned office building. Parisa was waiting for us with another vehicle, a van with false compartments designed to hide people. "The boy is injured," I reported as we transferred the family. Parisa, who fortunately had medical training, quickly examined the wound. The bullet went through cleanly. "Heal. Survive, but we need to stop the bleeding." While she treated Amir, I prepared the next phase. The original plan was to take them north to the Caspian Sea, where a boat would take us to Azerbaijan. But with the general alert, all major roads would be monitored. "Change of plans," I announced. "We're going west, not north." "West?" Parisa looked confused. "There's no extraction route to the west." "Now there is," I replied, showing him a map on my phone. "Secondary contact in Kurdistan. We'll cross the border into Iraq and from there into Turkey." It was a longer and more dangerous route, but also less expected. I figured the authorities would focus their efforts on routes north, toward Russia and Azerbaijan, or south, toward the Persian Gulf. Parisa hesitated only a moment before nodding. "I'll call my contacts in Kermanshah. They can help us cross." For the next 3 days, we traveled only at night, hiding during the day in safe houses and abandoned warehouses. Amir developed a fever, likely due to a wounded infection, but we managed to obtain antibiotics through Parisa's network of contacts. On the 4th day, we reached the Iran-Iraq border near the city of Marivan. There, we parted ways with Parisa. "You saved our lives," he told her, hugging her briefly. "Just make it worth it," she replied. "These people risked everything for what they believed was right." We crossed the border at night, through a mountain pass used by smugglers. On the Iraqi side, we were met by a group of Kurdish guerrillas who had been paid to escort us to the Turkish border. The journey through Iraq was tense, with numerous military checkpoints and areas still unstable after years of conflict. Layla remained strong for her children, but I could see the fear and exhaustion in her eyes. "My husband," she asked me one night as we camped in the mountain, "is he really safe?" "It is," I assured. "I saw the confirmation myself before I left on my mission." "Why did he do this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why did he betray our country?" I looked at her, understanding her confusion. "He doesn't see it as a betrayal, Layla. He believes he's saving millions of lives by preventing nuclear escalation." She nodded slowly. "I always knew this day would come." He never agreed with the use of his work. When we finally crossed into Turkey, 7 days after the initial extraction, I sent the confirmation signal to Jackson through a secure channel. 6 hours later, an unidentified American military helicopter landed in a remote field and transported us to Incirlik Air Base. There, we found Dr. Nazari waiting. The family reunion was emotional hugs, tears, rapid-fire words in Farsi that I couldn't fully understand. I stood at a distance, watching, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and melancholy. General Jackson arrived the next day. After verifying that the Nazari family was safe and well, he called me in for a private briefing. "Mission accomplished, Hayes," he said, allowing himself a rare smile. "The extraction method worked exactly as you predicted, despite the unexpected complications." "Thank you, sir. What happens now?" "Now comes the tricky part," he replied, his expression returning to its usual seriousness. "Officially, this operation never happened. The Nazari family will be resettled in the U.S. under new identity. Dr. Nazari has already begun sharing valuable information about Iran's nuclear program. What about me?" Hesitated briefly. "Alexandra Hayes will remain missing for now. We have another mission for you, if you're willing." I wasn't surprised. In a way, I'd expected it. "What kind of mission?" "Similar, but even more delicate. We need someone with your skills for a long-term operation, possibly a year or more." I thought of Fort Bragg, of Whitaker, of the public humiliation, of the closed doors to career advancement. And then I thought of the last 2 weeks, the danger, the adrenaline, but mostly the clear purpose, the feeling of doing something genuinely important. "I'm in," I replied without hesitation. 2 days later, we flew to an unofficial facility outside Washington, D.C. There, Smith was waiting for me with a new identity, new documents, a new appearance. "Welcome back from the dead, Catherine Russell," he said, handing me a Canadian passport. "Ready for your next life?" I took out my passport, studying the photo my face, but with red hair, green contact lenses, and a small, unnatural scar on my chin. "More than ready," I replied. As I prepared for my new assignment, I thought about Whitaker and the meeting where he had humiliated me. Unbeknownst to me, he had pushed me down the path I was destined to follow. His contempt had been the key that unlocked the door to my true potential. If I ever returned as Alexandra Hayes, he wouldn't recognize me, not just because of my changed appearance, but because I was no longer the same person. I no longer sought approval or recognition from the system he represented. I had disappeared under sealed orders, and in the process, found my true purpose. Some people spend their entire lives searching for. I had to die, at least officially, to find it. 3 months later, I received a small package from Jackson. Inside was just a newspaper. It was a short obituary for Colonel James Whitaker, who had died during a training accident in Afghanistan. In the margin of the paper was a handwritten note, "Karma." I felt no joy or satisfaction at the news, just a strange sense of completeness. I burned the clipping and the note and continued my mission as Catherine Russell, a logistics specialist for a private security firm operating in Southeast. My new assignment took me to Hong Kong, where I spent 8 months undercover in a network trafficking sensitive technology to North Korea. The work was less physically intense than extracting the Nazari, but infinitely more complex psychologically. I had to maintain my cover 24/7, earning the trust of criminals and industrial spies while gathering crucial information for the U.S. With each new mission, I thought less about Alexandra Hayes and more about the agent I had become. The Army captain with traditional career ambitions seemed like a different person, almost a stranger. It was during my third deployment, 16 months after my disappearance, that I received word that Lieutenant Colonel Garcia, my former commanding officer at Fort Bragg, had been promoted to colonel and taken Whitaker's place. From the reports I received, he had implemented several of my tactical recommendations, including the extraction method Whitaker had ridiculed. One rainy night in Bangkok, while monitoring a target, I received an encrypted message from Jackson. Captain Hayes officially listed as Mia, presumed dead after classified mission. Memorial held today at Fort Bragg. Garcia spoke highly of you. It was strange to read about my own memorial. Stranger still to imagine people mourning my death when I had never felt more alone. Perhaps it was for the best Alexandra Hayes could rest in peace while I continued the work that now defined who I was. 2 years after my disappearance, I was called back to Washington for a briefing with Jackson. He was different, older, more tired, with more wrinkles around his eyes. "You've done an exceptional job, Hayes," he said, using my real name for the first time in a long time. "Your operations have saved countless lives and significantly strengthened the U.S. strategic position. Thank you, sir. What now?" He slid a folder across the desk. "I'm offering you a choice. Option 1, continue as you are, with a new identity and a new mission. Option 2, officially return." Return? I couldn't hide my surprise. How could that be possible? "I'm dead, remember?" "Mia, presumed dead," he corrected. "We can create a cover story: capture by insurgents, recent escape, rescue by Allied forces. You'd return a heroine with a promotion to major awaiting you." I considered the offer, wondering what it would be like to return to normal military life, to the rigid hierarchies, the endless meetings, and what would my role be if I returned? Special operations training, official implementation of their extraction method, now known as the Hayes Protocol, possibly a position at the West Point Academy, teaching the next generation. It was a tempting offer: recognition, stability, the chance to shape the future of the Army. What about the other option? Jackson opened the second folder. Director of Operations for a new special unit, completely clandestine, reporting directly to the National Security Council. No bureaucracy, no backroom politics, just the work you've proven yourself exceptionally good at. I would still be dead. Officially, yes. Alexandra Hayes would remain at the Fort Bragg Memorial, but you would have full resources at your disposal, a small but elite team, and Near total operational autonomy, I looked out the office windows at the National Mall stretching out beyond. Washington, D.C., in the autumn sunshine, was beautiful, serene, so far removed from the dark places where I had operated for the past 2 years. Who would know the truth? Just me, the CIA director, the Secretary of Defense, and the President. I thought of all the Alexandras I could have been, the career officer methodically rising through the ranks, facing sexism and politics, possibly one day reaching the rank of general. I thought of the Alexandra who had been humiliated by Whitaker, who had doubted her own worth because others did. And then I thought about the person I had become, someone defined not by how others saw me, but by what I knew I was capable of achieving. I choose the second option, I finally replied. Alexandra Hayes served her country well. May she rest in peace. Jackson nodded, not looking surprised. I thought you'd say that. There's a base of operations prepared for you in Virginia. Your new team has been selected and is awaiting instructions. And for all intents and purposes, you will be known only as Phantom. Phantom, I repeated, testing the code name. Suitable. When I left the building that afternoon, I felt a strange sense of closure. Alexandra Hayes had died that day at Fort Bragg, when Whitaker publicly humiliated her. What had been reborn was something stronger, more defined, more focused. I would never again be belittled or underestimated. Never again would I have to prove myself to men like Whitaker. Never again would I be limited by the prejudices and expectations of others. The next morning, as I drove to Virginia to take up my new command, I stopped at a military cemetery in Arlington. I had no one in particular to visit. My parents were buried elsewhere, and I had no other relatives there. I walked among the perfectly aligned headstones, thinking of all those who had given their lives for their country. In a way, I had given my life to, not with a physical death, but with the sacrifice of my identity, my past, my chance at a normal life. I stopped near an ancient oak tree and pulled a small U.S. Army captain's badge from my purse, the last thing Alexandra Hayes had left. I buried it under a small layer of earth between the trees. Rest in peace, Captain, I murmured. You did your duty. So I stood up, adjusted my sunglasses, and walked back to the car. Phantom had work to do. 5 years later, on a rare visit to Washington, I stopped for coffee at a small cafe near the Pentagon. While waiting for my order, I noticed a group of military officers entering, among them, now General Garcia. He didn't recognize me, of course. My hair was different. I wore colored contact lenses, and years of field operations had changed not only my appearance, but also the way I moved and carried myself. Garcia looked good, older, but with the same dignified bearing I remembered. As he and his colleague sat at a nearby table, I overheard fragments of their conversation. "The new Hayes Training Center," one of the other officers said. "Completely revolutionizing our extraction protocols." "She deserves it," Garcia replied. Alexandra was a visionary. If only they had listened to her sooner. "Do you really believe she died on that mission?" asked a younger officer. "There are rumors that Garcia interrupted her with a gesture. "Don't entertain conspiracy theories. Lieutenant, Captain Hayes gave her life serving this country. The least we can do is honor her sacrifice by implementing her ideas." I smiled softly as I grabbed my coffee and left. It was ironic that my death had given my ideas the credibility they never had while I was alive. Maybe that's just how it was. Prophets are rarely recognized in their own time. That night, in my secure Georgetown apartment, I received a file about the upcoming mission. A terrorist group had obtained materials for a radioactive device and was planning an attack on American soil. My team would be responsible for locating and neutralizing the threat. As I reviewed the material, I reflected on how my life had changed since that day at Fort Bragg. The humiliation I suffered at Whitaker's hands, which at the time seemed like the end of my ambitions, had actually been the catalyst for something much greater. Sometimes our greatest failures open doors that success never could. Sometimes we need to, symbolically, die to be reborn as the person we were meant to be. Alexandra Hayes had disappeared under sealed orders, but what had emerged from the shadows was infinitely more powerful. Not just a soldier following orders, but an autonomous force shaping the course of global events. He humiliated me in front of everyone. The next day, I, an army captain, disappeared under sealed orders, and I found my true purpose in the shadows where Alexandra Hayes would never again. The next morning, I prepared for my new mission. My team consisted of just 5 people, all handpicked, all with stories similar to mine. People who officially no longer existed, but who continued to serve in the shadows. Marcus Reed, former Navy SEAL, killed during an operation in Somalia. In reality, he had been recruited after uncovering a corruption scheme involving his commanding officer and was silenced. Tor would have been, had Jackson not found him first. Eliza Chun, a former NSA analyst and cryptography expert whose car crash had been reported 3 years earlier after she discovered a security flaw that exposed American agents abroad. Darius Williams, a military doctor who had treated a senior NATO official who had been poisoned during a conference in Brussels. The poisoner had tried to silence him permanently, but Darius survived and was brought to our unit. And finally, the Rivera twins, Carlos and Anna, former Air Force communications specialists who had intercepted a transmission they shouldn't have. Rather than eliminate them, as some had suggested, Jackson saw potential in their extraordinary ability. We were Jackson's ghosts, his personal unit for the missions no one else could perform, those that required not only technical skill, but also the ability to operate completely separate from any official connection to the American government. Our operational base was on the outskirts of Alexandria, Virginia, a property apparently owned by a private security consulting firm called Horizon Analytics. From the outside, it looked like just another generic corporate office. Underground, however, we had a command center with state-of-the-art equipment and access to resources that high-ranking Pentagon officials didn't even know existed. "Good morning, Phantom," Marcus greeted me as I entered the operating room. It was strange how we got used to our codey names, sometimes almost forgetting the names we had before. "What do we have?" I asked, accepting the cup of coffee Eliza offered me. "Terrorist group Crescent Dawn," she explained, activating the main screen where maps and photographs. "Operative cell identified in Detroit. We believe they have acquired enough radioactive material for a dispersal device, not a full nuclear bomb, but enough to render part of a major city uninhabitable for decades. Source? Contact in Karachi," Darius replied. "High-level informant, confirmed by 2 independent channels. The material was transferred 3 weeks ago. It arrived via Canada." I examined the suspects' photographs. 3 men of Pakistani origin, 2 American all had histories of radicalization, but none had known links to terrorist groups so far. "What is the expected timeline?" "We estimate the device is in the final stages of assembly," Carlos Rivera said, sliding a tablet toward me with technical specifications. "Given the recent acquisition of certain electronic components, we estimate a 72-hour operational window until they are ready to deploy." 3 days. It was a short time, but we had already operated with less. "Is the FBI or Homeland Security involved?" "No," Anna Rivera replied. "General Jackson wants this completely out of official channels. If we alert domestic agencies, the group might have informants who would tip them off. And if we fail," she trailed on. "If we failed, no one would know we had tried. And if we succeeded, no one would know we existed." "Action plan?" I asked, studying the map of Detroit where the group's suspected location was marked, an abandoned warehouse in the industrial area, isolated enough for their activities to go unnoticed. "Infiltration and neutralization," Marcus replied. "Silent entry, device identification, capture of suspects, if possible, elimination if necessary." "And the device itself?" "I have contacts in the scientific community who can handle the materials safely," Eliza said. "The team is on standby, unaware of the full operation, just prepared for a radioactive material containment exercise." I nodded, forming the plan in my travel time. "Private jet waiting in lane. We can be on site in 3 hours. Then let's go." As we prepared, I reflected on how our unit operated differently from conventional forces. There was no bureaucracy, no rigid protocols to follow, just the objective and the freedom to achieve it by whatever means we deemed most efficient. It was what I had always believed the Army should be: agile, adaptable, focused on the mission, not on appearances. The drive to Detroit was silent, each of us absorbed in our own thoughts and preparation. I mentally reviewed the terrorists' profiles, trying to anticipate their actions, their possible traps. Thinking about anything specific? Marcus asked, sitting down next to me. The difference between then and now, I replied. If this were a conventional military operation, we'd be on our third briefing right now, with senior officers questioning every detail of the plan, modifying it until it's unrecognizable and probably ineffective. He smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. That's why we're here and not there. Some people aren't cut out to serve within the system. Do you miss it? I asked. Your old life? He considered for a moment. I miss the camaraderie sometimes, the sense of belonging, but I don't miss the limitation. He paused. What about you? I thought of Alexandra Hayes, of the ambitious officer I had been, of the hopes I had for my career. No, I answered honestly. I don't. We landed at a small private airport outside Detroit, where 2 unmarked vehicles awaited us. As we drove to our destination, Eliza continually updated the remote surveillance data we had established at the target location. Movement confirmed, she reported. 4 individuals identified inside the structure. Heat patterns consistent with activity in the southwest area of the building. Entry plan? Darius asked, checking his medical equipment both for treating potential casualties and for handling hazardous materials. 2 points, I replied. Alpha Team me, Marcus, and Darius by the east entrance, near the activity area. Bravo Team Eliza and the Riveras by the north entrance, covering a possible escape route and establishing a communications perimeter. What if there are civilians? Asked Anna. Unlikely given the isolation of the location, but we will visually inspect before acting. The device is the priority, followed by the operatives. Discretion is crucial. No witnesses, no evidence. We parked 2 blocks from the target, in an abandoned industrial area where our vehicles wouldn't attract attention. It was midnight, the sky overcast with heavy clouds that promised rain, giving us additional cover. We split up as planned, moving silently through alleys and vacant lots until we reached the perimeter of the warehouse. The building was large, a remnant of Detroit's industrial glory, now decaying and partially collapsed in some sections. In position, Eliza whispered through the barely audible communicator in my ear. Moving forward, I replied, signaling to Marcus and Darius. Using a thermal imaging device, we confirmed the position of the 4 individuals inside the structure. They were gathered around what appeared to be a work table, completely focused on something we couldn't see. Marcus silently picked the side door lock while I prepared a small diversion charge known lethal, just enough to momentarily confuse them. Darius positioned himself to provide cover. 3, 2, 1, I counted mentally, before throwing the device through a partially broken window. The flash and disorienting sound did their job, and we burst into space in perfect synchrony. On the ground! Now! Marcus ordered, his gun pointed at the stunned group. 2 of them obeyed immediately, falling to their knees with their hands up. The third tried to reach for something under the table, possibly a gun. I didn't hesitate. A precise shot to his shoulder knocked him down, screaming in pain but alive. The 4th man, however, ran to what appeared to be the device on the table. Freeze! I shouted, but he didn't comply. Instead, he began typing on a keyboard connected to a series of electronic components and what appeared to be a metal container. There was no time to deliberate. I fired, hitting him in the head. He fell backward, his body collapsing to the ground with a dull thud. Device, I warned, cautiously approaching the table. Darius took the lead this time, his experience with hazardous materials guiding his actions. It appears to be a timer trigger, he said, examining it carefully without touching it. It hasn't been activated. Bravo team? Status? I called over the perimeter secure, Eliza replied. No sign of reinforcements or outside surveillance. While Darius worked on the device, Marcus and I secured the 3 remaining suspects, 2 alive and conscious, 1 injured but stable. Who are you? Asked one of them, a middle-aged man with a Midwestern accent. FBI? Homeland? I didn't answer. I just tightened the handcuffs on his wrists. It doesn't matter, he continued, a disturbing smile forming on his face. Others will come after us. This is just the first wave. First wave of what? Marcus asked, his voice dangerously. Of purification, the man replied. This country has forgotten God. It needs to be remembered through fire. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't the usual rhetoric of international terrorist groups, but something different. A domestic religious fanaticism mixed with foreign ideology, a dangerous and unpredictable combination. Secure device, Darius finally announced, but it's more sophisticated than we expected. Definitely not the work of amateurs. Who built this for you? I asked the man who had spoken. He just smiled, his eyes shining with a disturbing The second detainee, younger, seemed less committed. His eyes darted nervously. Between us and the body of his dead companion, you still have a chance to live, I told him, my voice deliberately soft. Your friend chose to die because of you. Are you ready to do the same? Shut up, Jacob, the older man shouted. They have no power over us. But I saw the doubt in Jacob's face, the fear overcoming the indoctrination. The engineer, he whispered finally. It was the engineer who designed it all. Traitor, the other man shouted, trying to lunge at Jacob, but Marcus. Isley restored. Who's the engineer? I pressed. We never saw him, Jacob replied, speaking more quickly now, the words pouring out as if a dam had broken. We only received instructions. Online, through encrypted channel. He provided the plan, the contacts for the material. He said it was just the beginning, that there were cells in other cities. ... Double quotes, my blood ran cold. If he was telling the truth, we weren't dealing with an isolated group, but a coordinated network, possibly with multiple devices being deployed across the country. Which cities? Marcus demanded. We don't know all of them, Jacob replied, ignoring his companion's furious glares. Just that we're the first phase. Chicago would be next. Then Minneapolis... Containment team en route, Eliza announced over the com. 8 to 3 minutes. I gestured to Darius, who administered a sedative to the 2 conscious inmates. The injured man was already unconscious due to blood loss, though stable thanks to the first aid administered. What do we do with them? Marcus asked, nodding toward the prisoners. Standard protocol, I replied. Extraction to deniable facility. Interrogation complete. What this meant, in practical terms, was that they would be transported to a location that officially didn't exist, where interrogation specialists, not torturers, but professionals trained in advanced interviewing techniques, would extract every scrap of useful information. Then, depending on their level of involvement and cooperation, they would either be processed through secret judicial channels or held indefinitely. It wasn't a process I particularly enjoyed, but I understood its necessity. Some threats simply couldn't be handled through the regular judicial system, with its public trials and the possibility of outside influence. The containment team arrived scientists and technicians in protective suits who took control of the device without question. To them, we were just anonymous federal agents conducting a drill. As they worked, Eliza approached me with a worried expression. We found something, she said, showing me a laptop the Riveras had recovered from a corner of the warehouse. Encrypted communication, but Carlos was able to access part of it. Looks like you were right. This is just one node in a larger network. I examined the partially decoded messages. There were no names or specific locations, just coded references and timelines. But one thing was clear. We were dealing with something much larger than a lone terrorist cell. How long for complete decoding? With the base's resources, maybe 12 hours, she replied. But there's something else. ... A digital signature Carlos identified. He says it's strangely familiar. Familiar how? Like something he saw before, in another context. He's checking it out now. I nodded, already formulating my next step. We need to return immediately. This goes beyond the original scope of the mission, as the containment team finished its work and our guests were discreetly transferred to a helicopter that had landed in a nearby field. I received a cryptic call from Jackson. Status? He asked without preamble. Device neutralized. 3 suspects captured. 1 eliminated. I reported efficiently. But we have complications. Evidence points to a networked operation. Multiple cells. Possible coordinated attacks. There was a long silence on the other end. Return immediately, he said finally. Full briefing in 6 hours. The flight back was tense. Each of us lost in thought about the implications of what we had discovered. This wasn't just a group of isolated fanatics, but a sophisticated operation with resources, planning, and, apparently, national reach. As we flew over the Midwestern state, Carlos Rivera approached, his normally calm face now lined with concern. "I've identified the signature," he said, keeping his voice low. "It's a specific coding style, developed by a programmer who worked for the NSA about 5 years ago." "Who?" I asked, feeling a weight forming in my stomach. "Dr. Alan Mercer," he replied, "cryptologist who disappeared after being accused of selling secrets. Officially, it is believed he was eliminated by his buyers when he was no longer useful. But you don't believe that." "Not with this evidence," Carlos confirmed. "The style is unmistakable. Mercer had a unique approach to encryption algorithms, almost like an artistic signature." "I'm right. He's not only alive, but he's the engineer the terrorists mentioned." The implication was disturbing. A former NSA agent with knowledge of American security protocols, surveillance systems, and weaknesses in our national infrastructure was now apparently coordinating terrorist attacks on American soil. "Have you shared this with anyone other than me?" "Not yet," he replied. "I wanted to check with you first." "Keep it that way for now," I instructed. "I want to check a few things before I take this too." "Jackson, something didn't quite add up. Why would a former NSA expert align himself with religious extremists? What was the connection between a presumably secular tech expert and fanatics talking about purification?" As soon as we landed, I requested access to Mercier's classified files using my authorization codes. What I found only deepened the mystery. Dr. Alan Mercer had been a prodigy, recruited by the NSA straight out of MIT age 22. For 8 years, he developed some of the most advanced encryption systems used by the American government. Then suddenly, he was accused of treasonal allegedly selling secrets to an unspecified international consortium. But the details were too vague. The evidence cited in the files seemed circumstantial, and the timing coincided with the political reorganization at the agency. I began to suspect that Mercer might have been a scapegoat for something bigger. His disposal was also curiously poorly documented, a 3-paragraph report claiming that reliable sources had confirmed his death in Zurich, no body, no details, no independent verification. And then I found something really interesting before his downfall. Mercer had worked on a special project, Godin named Archangel, a home surveillance system that had been officially canceled after privacy legal officially canceled. But there were indications in related files that parts of the project continued under another name, another budget, another oversight. By the time Jackson called us in for the briefing, I had already formed a disturbing theory, though I still didn't have all the pieces. The conference room at our base was austere, functional, without the formalities of regular military installations. Jackson was accompanied by a man we'd never seen before, tall, thin, with neatly trimmed gray hair and cold eyes behind discreet glasses. "This is Mr. Vance," Jackson introduced briefly, "security consultant to the National Council. He's been briefed on our operation and has a special interest in the results." Vance didn't offer a handshake, just nodded briefly. His eyes roamed over each of us, assessing, calculating. "Impressive work in Detroit," he commented, his voice as cold as his eyes. "Particularly the containment of the device without alerting local authorities." "It wasn't a simple exercise," I replied, studying him warily. There was something about Vance that deeply bothered me, a calculating quality that went beyond what was normal. "For someone in his position, it never is," he agreed. "But that's why your unit exists, isn't it? To handle what other agencies can't or shouldn't touch." Jackson cleared his throat slightly. "Phantom, please report your full findings." I presented a detailed summary of the operation, including what we had learned about the broader network and the possible planned attacks. I deliberately omitted any mention of Mercer or Carlos's identification of the digital signature. Something told me this information needed to be kept private for now. "And your assessment of the ongoing threat?" Jackson asked when I finished. "Critical and immediate," I replied. "I believe we are dealing with a coordinated operation with multiple targets. I recommend immediate investigation of the cells in Chicago and Minneapolis mentioned by the suspect." "We're already taking action," Vance said, his voice soft but authoritative. "Teams are being mobilized as we speak." "Our teams?" Marcus asked, expressing the doubt I also felt. "Other units with similar capability," Vance replied vaguely. "You will be needed for a different aspect of this operation." I exchanged a quick glance with Eliza, whose eyebrows rose slightly in surprise. "In all our years operating as a ghost unit, We had never been informed of the existence of other similar units. And what would that aspect be? I asked. Vance slid a folder across the desk. We've identified what we believe to be the source of these threats. A. High-level operative, codename Prometheus. I opened the folder to find a file on someone completely different. Mercer, known extremist with connections to groups in the Middle East and a history of anti-American statements. Our intelligence indicates that Prometheus is currently on American soil, personally coordinating this wave of attacks. Vance continued. Your mission is to locate and neutralize him. I studied the file, my mind racing. Either Vance was genuinely misinformed, or he was deliberately steering us away from Mercer. In either case, I realized I needed to play along for now. Any clues as to his current location? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Preliminary intelligence suggests the Washington metropolitan area, Jackson replied. More specifically, potentially operating from a cell in Alexandria or Arlington, practically in our backyard. It was too convenient. When do we start? Asked Marcus. Immediately, Vance replied. Full details are on file. Consider this top priority. After Vance left, I lingered briefly with Jackson. Any additional information we should know, sir? He studied me for a long moment, his face expression. Just follow protocol, Phantom, and maintain regular communication. There was something in his voice, a subtle, almost imperceptible tension, but it didn't escape my trained attention. Jackson was worried, maybe even suspicious. When we gathered the team in our private planning room, I activated maximum security protocol, checking for electronic eavesdropping, blocking outside signal, making sure no one else could hear us. Something's wrong, Eliza said immediately, expressing what we all felt. Other units like ours? Since when? And this Prometheus guy? Darius added. The profile doesn't match what we saw in Detroit. Those men weren't radical Islamic extremists. They were American Christian fundamentalists. Not to mention, no one said anything about an engineer, Anna observed. Because they didn't want us to talk, Carlos said, meeting my gaze. You didn't deliberately mention Mercer, did you? I nodded. Something doesn't add up. Prometheus's profile, the sudden mention of other units, the rush to redirect us to a manhunt in Washington. Do you think it's a distraction? Marcus asked. Or a trap? Possibly both, I replied. But the question is, why? Why divert us from the investigation of the engineer? Why send us on a hunt for the apparently wrong man? Unless Mercer is much more important than he seems, suggested Eliza. Or unless someone doesn't want us to find out the real connection, Anna added. I studied the Prometheus file again, looking for inconsistency, clues, anything that might help me understand what was really going on. We'll proceed on two fronts, I finally decided. Officially, we're on a mission to locate Prometheus. Marcus, you lead this with Anna and Darius. Make it look real, report back regularly, and follow up on leads. And the other front? Asked Eliza. You, Carlos, and I will investigate Mercer and the Archangel project discreetly. I want to know what he was really developing, why he was purged, and if there's any connection to these attacks. What about Jackson? Asked Marcus. Is he with us or against us on this? It was a crucial question. Jackson had been our protector, our commander, the person who had given us a second chance when the system had discarded us. I don't know, I answered honestly. For now, we'll keep this between. If he's on our side, he'll eventually give us a sign. If not, ... I left the sentence incomplete, but everyone understood the implication. If Jackson was working against us, or being manipulated by Vance and whoever he represented, we were alone and possibly in great danger. For the next 48 hours, we operated as if we were fully committed to hunting Prometheus. Marcus established surveillance at the designated location. Anna infiltrated potential support groups, and Darius prepared safe houses for possible detention. Meanwhile, Eliza, Carlos, and I immersed ourselves in researching Mercer and Archangel, utilizing unofficial resources and backchannels to avoid detection. What we discovered was deeply disturbing. Archangel wasn't just a surveillance system, it was a complete information control program designed to monitor, filter, and, when necessary, manipulate mass domestic communication. A technological big brother that would make Orwell shudder. Even more, Disturbing, we found evidence that Mercer had opposed the full implementation system, arguing that it went beyond national security and into population control. Shortly thereafter, he was charged with treason. He didn't betray the country, Eliza concluded, studying the documents we'd obtained. He threatened to denounce the project, which would explain why someone wants to keep it buried, Carlos added, and why they're directing us to another target. But that doesn't explain the terrorist attacks, I observed. If Mercer was silenced for threatening to expose Arcanjo, why would he now be helping extremists attack American civilians? Unless... Eliza began, her eyes widening with realization. Unless it isn't. What do you mean? What if the attacks aren't actually organized by Mercer? What if someone is using his coding style, his signature, to implicate him? It was a possibility I hadn't considered, but it made terrible sense. A false flag, I muttered, creating a terrorist threat using Mercer's signature. Which would justify the full implementation of Arcanjo, Carlos added. A national security crisis that would make public opinion receptive to extreme surveillance measures. We need proof, Eliza said. Something concrete that connects these attacks to whoever is really behind them. That's when my secure phone vibrated with a message from Marcus. Prometheus located. Proceeding with surveillance. Coordinates sent. The coordinates pointed to a hotel in Arlington not far from our own base. Coincidence? Hardly. It could be a trap, warned Carlos. It almost certainly is, I agreed. But it might also be our only chance to find out what's really going on. I decided that Eliza and Carlos would continue the digital investigation while I joined Marcus on surveillance of Prometheus. If it was a trap, I'd rather face it head-on than let my team be caught off guard. The hotel was modest, the kind that asked no questions and accepted cash. Marcus was positioned in a room in the building across the street with a direct view of the target. Room 237, he informed me when I arrived. A man matching Prometheus's description arrived 3 hours ago. No outside contact since. I studied the hotel through binoculars. It seemed normal, maybe even too peaceful. Something's not right, I muttered. It's too exposed, too obvious for someone supposedly coordinating a domestic terrorist network. I thought the same, Marcus. Agreed. It seems... stage. My phone vibrated again, a text from Eliza. We found something. Come back immediately. Continue surveillance, I instructed Marcus. But take no action until I return. Something is happening. When I returned to base, Eliza and Carlos were visibly agitated, their expressions a mixture of shock and urgency. We've managed to access Mercer's personal files, Eliza explained. Hidden backups he left on obscure servers. They include complete documentation about Arcanjo, who was behind him, and why Mercer was silenced, and I pressed, sensing we were finally getting to the heart of the matter. Vance, Carlos replied simply. He's not just a consultant. In Mercer's document, he appears as Arcangel's chief operating officer, reporting directly to a shadow committee outside official government. A chill ran down my spine. So Vance eliminated Mercer when he threatened to expose the project, and now he's orchestrating these attacks to justify its implementation. Exactly, Eliza confirmed. And there's more. We've found recent communications that suggest the Prometheus at Arlington is a decoy, likely an innocent bystander or a hired actor, placed there to distract or eliminate us. And the real threat? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Chicago and Minneapolis are real, Carlos replied. Great. Genuine cells, recruited and directed by Vance's operatives, posing as extremists. Real devices, but remotely controlled, ready to be detonated at any convenient time. The implication was monstrous. Vance and whoever he represented were willing to sacrifice American civilians to advance their agenda of control and surveillance. We need to alert Jackson, I decided. If he's not involved, we need his help to stop this. What if it is? Asked Eliza. Then we're on our own, and we'll need a different plan. I tried contacting Jackson through our usual secure channel, but there was no response. Instead, I received an encrypted message on a secondary channel we rarely use. Suspected compromise. Meet me at Site Omega in 1 hour, alone. The Omega location was an emergency meeting place, Jackson had established years ago a small cafe in Georgetown frequented mostly by college students, noisy enough to make eavesdropping difficult and casual enough not to arouse suspicion. It could be a trap, Carlos warned again. It almost certainly is, I repeated my earlier assessment. But I see no alternative. You guys stick with the contingency plan. If I'm not back in 3 hours, assume the worst and act accordingly. The contingency plan was our final safeguard, a protocol we had developed for the scenario that our unit was compromised or betrayed by those who were supposed to protect us. It involved releasing all the information we had to multiple channels simultaneously in a way that couldn't be easily suppressed, followed by the activation of new identities and escape routes for each of us. As I headed to the cafe, I mentally reviewed everything we'd discovered and the horrific implications. If we were right, we were facing not just terrorists, but a conspiracy within the American government itself. People willing to orchestrate attacks against their own citizens to justify draconian control measures. It was the kind of conspiracy theory that sounded like a paranoid theory, except we had concrete evidence, documentation, connection. And now, we apparently also had targets on our backs. The cafe was crowded, as expected, with students chatting, animated indie music playing in the background, the aroma of coffee and food creating a cozy atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the gravity of the situation. Jackson was already there, sitting in a far corner, dressed casually in jeans and a light jacket, so different from his usual military uniform that for a moment I almost didn't recognize him. "Are you being followed?" he asked without preamble as I sat down. "Probably," I replied honestly. "I've taken precautions, but if Vance has the resources we suspect, ... double quotes he does," Jackson confirmed, his voice low and strained, "and more. I've suspected it for a while, but I had no proof until recently." "So you're not involved?" He looked genuinely offended. "With Arcanjo?" "Absolutely not. That bill violates everything I swore to protect. The Constitution, civil liberties, the very essence of what makes this country worth living." I studied his face, searching for any sign of deceit. I found none, but I had learned long ago that appearances can often be deceiving. "We found the Mercer connection," he said finally, "and evidence that the attacks are a false flag operation." Jackson nodded gravely. "I was suspicious when Vance suddenly appeared and redirected your mission. He shouldn't have even known about your unit's existence. Who exactly is he?" "Officially, a national security advisor. In reality, he represents a consortium of interest intelligence agents, the military, private corporations, all united by the belief that total security justifies total control. And what can we do?" Jackson slid a small data drive across the table. "All the evidence I could gather on Vance, Archangel, and the false flag operation includes the exact locations of the devices in Chicago and Minneapolis, the identities of Vance's operative, and the complete chain of command." "Why are you giving me this?" I asked, although I already suspected the answer. "Because I won't make it to the end of the day," he replied calmly. "Slow-acting poison administered this morning during a supposed coffee with Vance. Symptoms will begin in approximately 2 hours. Death in 6. Undetectable. It will look like a heart attack." I felt my blood run cold. "We can seek medical treatment ... double quotes too late," he interrupted. "And there's no time to waste. The attacks are scheduled for tomorrow, timed to create maximum panic and justify the immediate implementation of Archangel as the only solution to the security crisis. How do we stop this? With this," he indicated the drive, "and with your skills, your team. You are my final contingency, Hayes. Always have been." It was the first time in years he had used my real name, and the impact was profound. "That's why you recruited me after Whitaker humiliated," I realized. "You were building a team that could operate completely outside the system if necessary. We needed people with exceptional skills, unwavering integrity, and nothing to lose. People whom the system had betrayed, but who still believed in what that system should stand for." I carefully put the drive away. "What should I tell the team about you?" "The truth," he replied simply. "It's always been my policy with you, even when it didn't seem like it." He paused, his gaze growing distant for, "You know, when I saw what Whitaker did to you in that meeting, I almost intervened. Immediately. But then I realized this was the ultimate test to see how you would respond to injustice, whether you would break or become stronger." and I passed the test. With distinction, he smiled briefly. You're exactly who this country needs right now, Hayes. Someone who understands that sometimes protecting principles means operating in the shadows. We said goodbye with a formal handshake, both aware that it was the last time we would see each other. It was an honor, sir, he said, feeling a lump in his throat. The honor was mine, Captain, he replied. Or should I say, Phantom? I returned to our base with a renewed sense of urgency and purpose. I gathered the team and shared everything: Jackson's sacrifice, the evidence on the drive, and Vance's impending plan. We have less than 24 hours to prevent 2 terrorist attacks and expose a conspiracy at the heart of the government, he concluded. We will receive no reinforcements, no official support, and if we fail, we will likely be portrayed as terrorists themselves. Marcus was the first to answer, his face determined. That's what we're here for, isn't it? To do what no one else can or will. The others nodded in agreement, each with the same resolve in their eye. We divided the tasks quickly and efficiently. Marcus and Darius would leave immediately for Chicago to neutralize the device there. Aina and Carlos would do the same in Minneapolis. Eliza and I would remain in Washington to confront Vance and expose the conspiracy. As we prepared, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me to this point. From an ambitious officer in the army to a shadow operative fighting enemies within the very system I had sworn to serve. There was something powerfully ironic about this. The public humiliation Whitaker had inflicted, which at the time seemed to destroy my future, had actually set me on the path to becoming exactly who I needed to be at this critical moment. Maybe what they said was true. Sometimes we have to lose everything to find out who we really are.